And I just wanted to give an update on the going on out there in the meats industry as far as the COVID-19 goes as well. So we should be done by at least 10:30, 11 o'clock on this. But normally, if you've heard me talk in the past, I try to start from a big global view down to a local view. This time I'm going to go the opposite direction. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody out there that meat processing here in the state at the local level, our family-owned meat processors, we are beyond maxed out. 5 weeks ago, I sat down with one of our meat processors and I was chatting with him, and he said, I'm already booking for October 2021. Yesterday, I was on the phone with a person looking to get their animals processed, and they were telling me they can't get anything at their preferred processor before March of 2022. So we're talking well over a year and a half out for processing in the state. And it all goes back to this whole COVID-19 scare that we're going through as well. I will say one thing, we're starting to see at the local level, things starting to expand a little bit. When we talked about this in late March, April, and May, I was talking about this kind of dichotomy of processors we had in the state, where you had the ones that were processing as much as they can, as fast as they can, everything they could, versus the others that were scared that they were going to get the virus and the plant, and if they had the virus in a cooler full of meat. We're starting to see those that are feeling that way loosening up a little bit, and they're starting to open up and they're starting to expand processing. This has got the attention of our Ag Commissioner, Dr. Quarles, as well as the committee at the Governor's Office of Ag Policy. They've identified the need to increase processing within the state. And so, like everything in government, we developed a subcommittee. And we were charged on this subcommittee of coming up with ways that we could affect meat processing. How can we expand meat processing, increase meat processing in the state? And as a committee, we sat down and came out with a 3-tiered approach, where we were going to the very first tier. What we thought was going to be the low-hanging fruit was, we're going to give you a monetary, financial incentive to process more animals. We know that from your HACCP records, we know that from your USDA records, we know an average of how many animals you process in a week's time, a month's time, and we know which species you process the most of, and so on. And so if you were able to go above that normal, we're going to pay you X number of dollars per animal above your average. That seemed like that was going to be low-hanging fruit. Last I chatted with folks at GOAP and KCARD, they haven't quite got the response from that part of the tier as they thought they were, but they are starting to see some of them going that way as well. The other 2 tiers looked at either purchasing new equipment or new technology, or facility improvements. And so one of the jobs that I do, as well as some folks at KCARD, is we go into a plant and we kind of help them assess, okay, where are your bottlenecks in your process, and is there technology out there or equipment that you can buy? We realize that these other 2 tiers, with the purchasing of new equipment as well as facility improvement, those aren't immediately going to help, but in the long run, they're going to help tremendously. And so we go in, and sometimes it's just as simple as maybe a new vacuum stuffer, a roll stock machine, or something along those lines. The others we're looking at is facility improvements. And one of the things that I kind of gravitated towards early on with these facility improvements is, granted, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I've never had a meat processor in any of the states that I've worked with say that I've got too much cooler or too much freezer. So we're always looking to expand that. But I also look at areas in their process that's going to keep them going. And what I'm meaning is, because of animal welfare, because of animal handling and stunning procedures, and the way the USDA looks at those, can we improve those areas so not only that not only helps you process more animals, it's going to keep you from getting shut down. And there's a couple of processors out there that we're working with on improving their facilities. Excuse me. Sometimes it's just as simple as new stunning equipment, as well as new new holding pens and so on and so forth. So those grants are out there and we're working on those. In fact, I've got a few visits this week. I've got to meet with some processors as well as we try to increase processing in the state. The one thing that I think all of us on the committee had in the back of our mind, we just didn't really realize how fast and how popular this was going to be, is we are now working on a fourth tier to this desire to increase meat processing in the state. And that's these folks that have tried to get animals into a facility, realizing that there is a 12, 18, 24-month waiting period. Okay, there's a need out there, so maybe I can start my own processing business. And that has exploded to monumental proportions. I'm averaging about 5 calls a week. I had 2 emails already today. I had a phone call yesterday, and here we are Tuesday. I'm already at 3. And so I suspect that we'll hit that average pretty quick as well, about 5 for me. I know KCARD, the Kentucky Center for Ag and Rural Development, they're getting even more than I am as well. And sometimes they're throwing them my way, and sometimes I'm throwing them back their way as well. So we're trading them back and forth as we try to get a number of people to help these folks as they desire to do this kind of stuff. The same thing that I tell them is I'll tell you, if we got some of our agents out here that are working with folks, labor is always going to be a huge issue in this. So, if you're working with these folks and before you send them to me, make sure they understand that labor is going to be a huge issue. But we are working on a granting system to help those that are wanting to start a new processor as well. Nationally, demand for meat is still extremely high. Volume-wise, we're still selling meat at record amounts. When we first got into this whole pandemic thing, I think even though we were trying our darndest to convince people that the supply was okay, we were intact, not to panic buy, we were still seeing a lot of that. And then we got into the holidays. And so if you think about it, we were kind of serendipitous. We hit when we had Easter, and then we had Mother's Day and Father's Day. And then we've seen a slight drop after Father's Day as compared to the numbers from last year, where we were about 0.5% lower than what we were last year for that week after Father's Day. However, 4th of July meat sales set records. It was amazing if you look at the data, how much meat that we were sold during the 4th of July weekend. And a lot of that has to do with families were finally getting back together. I know personally, my in-laws came over from Indiana, which is the first time we'd seen them since Christmas. And we can't go to the restaurant because, the restaurants are open, yes, but because of social distancing, or as Paul says, physical distancing, I like that phrase better, and capacity in these restaurants, you can't get a whole family in there. So people were staying home and grilling. The one thing that's going to be interesting is prices still remain high. The whole supply and demand type thing is what's driving a lot of those things. But I'm very comfortable in saying that we are starting to see the limits in the empty store shelves go away. I'm curious as to what's happening out in the rural communities. They seem to experience more meat shortages and limits than we did here in the area of Lexington, especially where I live in Richmond as well. We were seeing shortages on shelves, and in Lexington as well. I have a kind of a just for fun part-time job as a tour guide at Buffalo Trace, and every once in a while I'll stop in some of the stores over there in Frankfort. I haven't seen any of that as well. The restaurants have opened, like we talked about earlier. That was the one thing I was curious was going to happen to our supply, especially our price, is when the restaurants opened up. And I've got kind of on there as they are open, but because of limited capacity, it's tough to get in there. And like Paul mentioned earlier, a lot of folks are still doing that curbside pickup, that go to the order at the restaurant, order it online and go pick it up type of thing. We are seeing that we are, with the physical distancing in the plant, the scattering of shifts and so on, that we are back up to about 80 to 90% of the capacity that we had last year at this time. Even some plants reporting up to close to 95% of their capacities last year, which is what I thought was going to happen as we got, as those facilities got more used to this new normal. that they would, again, adjust to it and start to move a little bit faster than they had in the past. Here's the challenge we have is, again, part of this big volume increase we've been seeing is because I do think we had some panic buying going on earlier in the pandemic, which was something that all of us in Extension tried to assure people that we were okay. And then what was kind of fortunate, we did hit that holiday season of Easter, Mother's Day, and Father's Day, and 4th of July. Now the challenge we have, we've got a long run to where we don't have a holiday to keep those volume numbers up until we get to Labor Day. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. The other thing that's going to be interesting is we're starting to see, I think some people would argue that we are starting to see the very beginning of that second spike that they've warned us about. And we're starting to see states roll back that reopening. California is one that comes to mind. Arizona, Texas, Florida, where we're starting to see record numbers of COVID cases. Again, even here in the Commonwealth, we're starting to see that, as well as those numbers of positives are going up. So what's going to happen to meat supply then, when we roll that, if these reopenings start to be rolled back on us? What's going to happen to meat supply when we get back to school? We are, here on campus, those of us that teach classes, we're struggling with, what are we going to do? What is my class going to look like this fall? And even at our grade school and high school levels, middle school levels, we're seeing that as well. And now the challenge that they have that we don't is, the students, kind of feed themselves. But when you have like a grade school, middle school, high school situation, we always see this kind of bump in demand in meat products, especially when we go back to schools. What's that going to look like as we go back, the school here in about a month or so? The industry has done a wonderful job. The question was, why do we see all these shutdowns if it wasn't transmitted by food? And it's not transmitted by food. The challenge we have for all these plant shutdowns was workers getting sick. I read yesterday in a story, almost 17,500 cases of COVID-19 related to the meats industry alone. And that's why you saw these plants shutting down. They came in and they did the PPE. They did the staggering of shifts, this distancing, the plexiglass between workforces that you see in the picture there. One of the things I thought was interesting was I was reading a Meat and Poultry magazine a couple of weeks ago. Now plants are looking at redesigning. And so that goes back to that question we had earlier of the filtration. What are the airflow in these plants? Part of that is we now know that that 6 feet rule that we have out there, but we also are starting to learn that this can kind of stay aerosoled and in the air for a longer period of time. And so in these plants they're basically assembly lines. That's where, if you look at your history, that's where Henry Ford got the idea for the assembly line, is when he went to Chicago and he viewed the meats industry up there. They are assembly line workers working elbow to elbow. They're not like that anymore. But if somebody's sick and that virus gets aerosoled, that's why they're working on those air filtration systems, redesigning their plants as well. The one thing I thought was really interesting is I read an article today by Dr. Temple Grandin, and she did an editorial for a kind of a blog post that I was reading today. And I thought she kind of hit it on the head when she said, we got big as an industry because we had to. We had to not only feed ourselves, we had to feed the world. But we've now seen that because we are big, that we are fragile too, because this took the industry to its knee. We popped back up. But I think the one thing, I use the NASCAR analogy of, we don't know how to fix something until it's broke. Well, I think we are better prepared for what's happening now. We went into this situation, not really, I don't know if it was our own hubris or what, of not thinking that this was going to be that big of a deal, but in reality, it was a big deal. I think now, if we do see this second spike, like they're talking about, some would argue that we're at the beginning of it now. I do think in the industry, we're more prepared for it than we were in the past. So with that, I told you I'd get you out here by 10:30, 11 o'clock. I guess we'll go ahead and answer any questions.
All right, Greg, appreciate it. Very nice. We actually already have a question in, so I'm going to share my screen since you quit sharing and give them a little bit of information there.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, the question is, if we are at 80 to 90%, should we
Mhm.
be at 125 to 150% to meet the current demand and the backlog?
It would be nice if we could. I still think everybody's trying to adjust to, and this is another phrase that I hate to say, is the new normal, so to speak. The challenge with going beyond 100%, I understand where you're coming from. There are chain speed limits, meaning that OSHA and the USDA have limits that you can only process a maximum number of animals per hour. And they put place not only for worker safety but for food safety as well. Right now in the pork industry, we're running. When they're running full song, you're talking 1,300 head of pigs an hour, 16 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. You're talking 400 to 500 head of cattle an hour in that time frame at these big plants. Now you look at the meat lab, we do like 2 head of cattle an hour if we're lucky. So that's the challenge is I don't think, and it's interesting somebody brought that up because I did see an article. I just kind of skimmed over it. Of are they going to loosen up those restrictions on chain speed? And it didn't appear like they were really looking at doing that either.
All right. Any speculation, Greg, on when the market might get straightened out and we're going to clear some of that backlog and all?
That's a good question. I was, again, I do think, like I said earlier, I think we're better prepared if we do have a second spike. I really hope that we don't have the second spike, although the early indications look like we might be at the beginning of it or in the middle of it in some states. I have read that we are still 2 or 3 years away. They're using kind of the Spanish flu as a model for what happened 100 years ago. So, getting that backlog taken care of, I have no idea. I can't even begin to speculate it. I will say we kind of became a victim of ourselves, where we through better management practices and genetic programs and better feeding, we produce an animal that gets to market fast. And then all of a sudden, the bottleneck was the processing industry, which we never thought. As I told folks, I think in our own back of our minds, well, we're technologically and medically too advanced to have a pandemic of this magnitude, and here we are.
All right, one last question, and then we'll let folks go. The question is, I live in North Carolina, and I am seeing plants at 30 to 50% capacity at the processing plants, pork,
Mm-hmm.
poultry, and beef. What are we doing to meet the labor demand to keep properly staffed?
They were again, like we said earlier, the PPE, the personal protective equipment. They were doing that. They were hiring other workers as well. What I'm about to say is probably not the most politically correct thing, but there are some folks out there that are making a lot more money on unemployment than they can at the going back to work. I realize that's probably not the most politically correct thing to say, but I would venture to say that those plants that are running at that low capacity are probably having trouble finding help. And it goes back to what I visit with people wanting to start their own meat processing facility at the family local level. Is that's always going to be an issue of trying to find help and trying to find help that will show up.
All right, very good. If anybody has any additional questions, you can email me and I will get it to the right person and get those answered for you. Apologize, we went a little long tonight, but I thought we had 3 very good topics, and we appreciate the speakers tonight and appreciate you guys sticking with us. If you're curious about where we're going from here, as you can see, what we're going to do is move to a monthly route. We're gonna still keep doing these presentations, but we're gonna move it to monthly, and probably gonna be sometime in the middle of the month. Probably gonna stick to Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern. So be looking for emails on that. We'll get you the YouTube links to all the sessions as soon as all of those are available. And the last thing is we are going to be doing a survey. We haven't been pestering you guys with a weekly survey, but we are going to send you one. If you are listening through Facebook and want to get registered to get the survey and willing to fill it out for us, please send me an email and I will get you on the list and we'll make sure you get the links for the survey. And for the rest of you, we would greatly appreciate you guys filling it out. With that, I'm going to end it. We appreciate everybody joining us tonight, and we'll see you in about a month. We'll have those dates and topics coming out here in the near future. So thanks again to our speakers and Dr. Van Valen for hanging in there and helping us out with the Facebook side of things. And we'll see you guys in about a month or before. Stay safe.